Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us on The Explainer. We're having a very important conversation on the show tonight, and that is on water and sanitation services. My guests tonight are Willis Mbai, who is the CEO of the Water Sector Trust Fund, and Ruth Ng'ang'a, who's the General Manager in charge of fund development at the Water Sector Trust Fund. Both of them to talk about why this is an important conversation, considering a very important investor conference in the space that's coming up in the month of March. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining both of us. Willis, I'd like to begin with you, maybe to just give us an overview of, what the water and sanitation, space looks like in terms of perhaps access and investments in the country.
Thanks very much, Yvonne, for having us from Water Sector Trust Fund. The point that you have raised in terms of access and investment is quite important, and maybe just to draw some statistics. In the water sector, we have a regulator that is charged with the responsibility of giving the correct information, and this is WASREB. It has given the water coverage in the country at 62%. That is in the impact issue of 2023, which was issue number 15. So as a ministry, that is, I think, our reference point. In terms of, that is also, it has also given the statistics in terms of sanitation. But I think what is wanting is the level of investment and what is needed for the investments to be put in place. And so there have to be mechanisms and ways of realizing this, and I think that speaks to this initiative that we have with the leadership of our ministry and sector institution coming together to have a water sector investors, water and sanitation investors conference.
All right. There are specific challenges, I suppose, in terms of raising investment in the rural areas. Could you speak to us about what the challenges have been in implementing water projects, particularly in areas of rural Kenya, and how you think these challenges can be addressed?
Thanks. Most of the predominant challenges include low investments, and that means who is going to invest, who is going to give the money. You are aware the development budgets at both levels is low. Secondly, there are also issues of capacities of the institutions that are working at that particular level, whether they have the requisite competencies and the managerial skills, and also whether they look at it from a business perspective. Most of rural projects will hardly live beyond their third or fifth birthday after the implementation. And also, there is a critical issue of non-revenue water. At whatever level we operate, you find water that is lost or that is not accounted for is also high. And lastly, which still borders on governance issues, do they have requisite committees, people who are knowledgeable? Do they have governance structures? Is there a board that is able to then handle? And the most important thing is when you draw the parallels in terms of the objectives of the WASIC conference, then you see a bit of this is going to be answered, if not in totality, but a significant contribution. Okay,
and we will talk about that conference and what you hope to, achieve with it. But Ruth, tell us about, the Water Fund and the overall role it plays in terms of promoting, particularly the, community-led initiatives for water and sanitation.
Okay, so thank you so much, Yvonne. So maybe just following up to what my CEO says, because our mandate is very much kind of focused towards the underserved and the marginalized. So we give financing at ground level, and we kind of focus on last mile connectivity, so that the projects that we finance almost always end up with somebody getting water, either in their house or at least a yard tap, or maybe there's a water kiosk nearby, and also developing sources. The Water Sector Trust Fund also contributes a lot into increasing or managing our water resources, because we also finance the protection of the subcatchment areas at community level. So these are activities that are done pretty much at grassroots level, even though they may be done by institutions that have the mandate, the capacity, like the water services providers, but sometimes they're also done by community-based organizations, and especially for water resources management, it's actually the water resources users, the community forest associations, the conservancies, so it really involves the community also in the issues of their water provision, sanitation, and also protection of the environment. So it kind of just instills that culture. Yeah.
And because you talk about reaching the marginalized and the underserved, so how do you ensure, that the funds, the grants that you give to these communities actually do end up serving those who need it the most?
Okay. I think I would say it is the procedures that we have put in place. So we have very, very set procedures for how we even do our calls for proposals, and basically make sure everyone who is in the target area for the funding is able to apply. And then we go through a rigorous appraisal of the projects to make sure that they actually are going to serve the purpose. And then when it comes to disbursing the financing for the projects, we have, again, procedures for disbursements against milestones without going into too many technical details, and also oversight. So we do a lot of monitoring. We work very closely with the county governments to make sure that the projects are well oversighted and they are well implemented. And then we also require accountability and transparency. So we follow very closely on the funds accountability statements and things like that. And even like 3 years after the project is finalized, we go back to check whether it is still sustainable, whether it is still operational, in an exercise that we call joint annual monitoring exercise. So I think for the trust fund, the level of transparency is very high, just because of the procedures that we've put in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this conference that's coming up in March. It's the Water and Sanitation Investors Conference. Willis, tell us about this conference. Who are you bringing together? What is the main outcome you hope to achieve from this conference?
Thanks, Yvonne. This conference is aiming at bringing as many investors as possible, both locally and internationally. And also beyond investors, we are looking at who else can we bring on board, because you have heard about the leadership of this country giving an outline of the number of dams that should be done, the number of social dams that should be done, and also the individual projects. In terms of numbers, we have 100, we have 1,000 social dams, and we also have more than 3,800 projects which are targeted to at least improve the coverage. So beyond the investors, we know we have several development partners in this country. We have embassies, we have various corporations. All these, I must confess that all these people have been invited at the various level, top level at the ministry to participate in the conference. And we look at that bringing a significant portion of the investment, and that translates into the question you are asking about what is the outcome. In my understanding, the outcome will always be a long-term. So in the long run, we expect a lot of increased investments in the sector, because looking at the Kenya Water Master Plan, then you get the gap which is there. And Yvonne, maybe at this particular point, it's also important to draw to your attention that the ministry has come up with what is called National Water and Sanitation Investment Plan, which projects that we need almost $1 trillion. And each of the sector institutions... $1 trillion shillings? $1 trillion shillings.
Okay, to invest in the sector?
Yes, to be able to be compliant to the SDGs and most of our development blueprints. And so with that, part of the contribution we want to make in terms of increasing the investment is that there are various partnerships which will come with this, partnerships which will yield growth in the sector. There are innovations and technologies. The technologies in the eyes of the people selling them is an investment, but to us it's both investment and also improvement and efficiency in our processes in the water sector. When we talk about issues of non-revenue water, it depends, can we have good meters, smart meters?
So when you say non-revenue water, for our viewers, what does that mean?
Non-revenue water is unaccounted for water.
Okay.
Water that has been treated and should go to the customers or individual connections or institutions. But at the end of the day, maybe due to physical losses or commercial losses, you find that you get like only a half.
Okay.
The statistics for non-revenue water in this country averagely stands at 45%. So you can also look at what we are losing as a country.
Okay, so 1 trillion shillings that is needed, and you've talked about, you know, all the different donors, partners and funders, public and private sector. Is that what you're looking at? A mix of both?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why is that partnership important between both sectors?
Yeah, it's important because, what we have now, one is that with the reclassification of our country as a low middle income country, then it has come with the consequences that the levels of grants have literally gone down. And so there have to be innovative ways and sustainable ways of financing our water infrastructure. And this is now where you bring private sector and public. Private sector will definitely have the resources, and don't take it too far. The commercial banks that we have in Kenya, we have programs that they have financed on certain agreements and subsidies, and the public institutions, of course, are the owners of the project. So on one hand, you have a project that you want to do, which you own, but you also want somebody to come and invest, and this definitely will help in our aim of increasing the coverage. Yes.
Ruth, let's talk about the role of the trust fund, particularly in this conference that's coming up in March. So what do you want to see as maybe acceleration of investments that comes out? Let's talk a little bit about what you hope, particularly in what specific areas, if you can.
Okay, so thank you so much. Allow me also to mention that this WASIC conference actually is hosted by the ministry through designation to the Water Sector Trust Fund. So we are the designated entity on behalf of the ministry to organize this and to be like the organizing host. In collaboration also, the ministry is collaborating also with the Council of Governors. So like the CEO says, there is a gap. There's a gap in financing the water sector. At the same time, there are opportunities. There are pipelines of projects. There are so many opportunities that there are projects that are just waiting for resources, or maybe even some kind of innovative technology so that they can take off. So the reason why this conference is important for accelerating the investments is that we want to bring the investors into the space, that platform, and then we bring the practitioners also from Kenya, and we present our case, and we present the pipelines, and we organize kind of lots of dialogue through high-level plenaries and through convener sessions, through business-to-business meetings, and also through exhibitions. And hopefully through those discussions, through those deliberations, there is going to be a matchmaking between challenges and solutions. Somebody wants to invest in something that is either profitable or something that meets their social goals. You know, sometimes investors may be doing it because they have a social goal. And somebody else requires a project to be done because they also have a duty to do service delivery in the country. Remembering that water and sanitation in our constitution is actually a human right. Likewise, a safe environment, which all comes into play when you're talking about water and sanitation. So we want to provide that platform. And we want to tell the investors, both in the country and outside the country, that the government is ready with a pipeline of public-private partnership projects, with a pipeline of other kind of projects that can be done with a different kind of private sector collaboration. Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't have to be PPP. It can just be a different kind of collaboration. And even partners who really just want to give grants, that is also a possibility. Yeah. And others who also want to finance through concessional loans. So it's an open space, and that is why the stakeholder participation is so wide. So we are inviting governments, we are inviting foreign missions, financing institutions, we are inviting the civil society as well, private sector, businesses and practitioners, and anybody who feels like they have a role in the water and sanitation sector. And with one focus though, it's an investors conference. Okay. It's not a same old, because we have a gap in the universal access. Yeah.
Yeah, and investment, as we've heard, you know, 1 trillion shillings would be needed if we are to meet the SDG goals
by 2030.
By 2030, which is now just, you know, 6 years away. Yeah. And with the call to that. Just for our viewers to understand, Willis, and you need not name specific projects by name, but you know, what are some of the projects that are invested in that provide water or access to water and sanitation services? So I know you talked about dams, but, you know, give us like the breadth of the projects. It's dams and what else? You know, water piping, you know, just help us understand what this investment goes into, so that perhaps when we're walking around, we see something and we know, that, you know, there's been an investment in this and this, and these are the areas. Maybe also for members of the public to say, hey, you know, we need something X here that'll be of use.
Thanks. There is a great range of investments that can be done in water. And basically you can say the sources or improvement of sources. You can say the superstructures. So we will have sources like dams, intakes, where the water is sourced from, especially, let's talk about Aberdare, for instance. You have heard of the Northern Collector Tunnel. By the way, we are saying this with authority because we are working as a whole sector, and all the sector institutions are engaged in this process. So we have elevated steel tanks, we have water kiosk, and for trust fund that is involved in the last mile and also working with the underserved and the marginalized. There are certain very specific and unique and deliberate projects that we undertake to make sure that we reach those people who are really underserved. So we have water kiosk, we have yard taps, that is at the very level. But we also have the significant assets which are being developed by the waterworks development agencies, which are more transboundary in nature. When you go to Baricho Waterworks, for instance. So there is also the issue of conservation of water resources, and perhaps you might be knowing that the regulator is there, that then makes sure that there are regulations for managing those water resources, because 50%, loosely I might refer to it, is of the water that we use in Kenya, or the most water companies are from the natural system, and this has to be conserved. And that is also a thematic area that we are looking at. So there are a wide range of investments. There are water meters, as I had said, and you will see most of the revenues of the water companies or institutions that we work with can really increase if they adopt the most appropriate technology. So you can see it ranges from the source to the superstructures to the technologies. It's all, and this is why we want to encourage everyone to come. Because in this 3-day conference, there will be this menu of seeing nearly whatever you want to see in the sector. Every important player, we have made invitation even to most multilateral donors or partners in this country and even beyond the borders.
Okay. As we close, Ruth, perhaps you can give us, your final thoughts. I think there's also, just to emphasize the theme of the conference that's coming up, and maybe it's also a call to investors about, how important this investment is.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. So the overall theme of this conference is accelerating investments for sustainable access to water and sanitation for all. And that word sustainable is very important. And I think that is why we are also looking now at bringing both public and private so that we can sustain, because the business models tend to be different also when you have also the private sector involvement. There are various thematic areas. The PPPs and blended financing is one of them. Universal access, we've talked about it quite a bit. The water resources management and climate change, and also the governance framework. So we want the investors also to understand what is our governance and regulatory framework as we call them to come in and participate in what we are doing. So this is a call to the investors to really come and see the opportunities in the country. And it is not just a water and sanitation issue. It is also a business case. Water is both a social and economic good. And whether we say it or not, whether we like it or not, there are people who are still making business out of water. But it is also a social good, and we have a right to make sure that the service delivery is done for all. So we are inviting everyone across the stakeholders who are practicing in water, because everyone has a role. Literally, everybody has a role. So the service providers, please come and showcase what you're doing. The investors, please come and see the opportunities that are there in our country. And maybe, Yvonne, if you allow me, before I close, just to appreciate those who have been supporting us in organizing this event. The CEO said it's a multi-stakeholder, and we have an organizing committee made of various institutions, and also a steering committee at the level of the ministry. But specifically to also appreciate our sponsors and our partners. I don't know if it's okay if I mention some of them.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we have Gatsby Africa, we have USAID, we have the Embassy of Denmark supporting us very greatly in this, the African Development Bank, and also the Sanitation Health Fund, and many others. And we just felt it's good just to mention so that people can understand that we are not like doing this alone, and it's a cross-section of public institutions and also private sector institutions and the whole of the national government in terms of water and sanitation, and also the Council of Governors working together with the ministry.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruth. Yeah. Willis, your closing thoughts?
Thanks very much, Yvonne, for this opportunity. For me, it is an opportunity to have this conference to realize some of the goals that have been evasive. If we are able to bring more resources to the sector, we will improve the lives of Kenyans. So please, Kenyans and more or less more of the investors and the stakeholders that we have highlighted, this is an opportunity for all of us.
Indeed. Thank you both very much. Willis Sambai, who's the CEO of the Water Sector Trust Fund, as well as Ruth Ng'ang'a, who's the General Manager of Fund Development at the Water Sector Trust Fund. Thank you both very much for making the time for us, and very best of luck with that Sanitation Investor, Water and Sanitation Investor Conference in March. We look forward to it, raising the funds that are needed to provide this all-important service to Kenyans in the asante sana. That's where we close our show tonight. Thank you very much for watching. We shall see you again soon. Have a good night. I'm Yvonne Okwara.